Welcome back, everybody. This is Eli, and this is Elfbait, and I'm on day 8 of the Dungeons & Dragons 30-day challenge. Now, for those of you who have been following along, you'll notice the shirt hasn't changed. I'm not wearing the same shirt day in and day out. I'm recording these on the same day because life is busy. It's the holiday season. I wanted to get these in the can, and I'll be releasing them on a day-to-day basis, but you caught me. You know, what can I say? I'm efficient. So, day 8, your favorite PC of my own. Favorite PC of my own. That's a hard one for me to answer. I haven't spent a lot of time, well, I have spent a lot of time playing characters in D&D, but I haven't done much playing since 2nd edition. I think the instances I have actually played a character since 2nd edition, I could count on half a hand. But I still have played. I mean, I prefer DMing, but I have played. So, my favorite character of all time has to be the horribly named Shagon Icehawk. So, Shagon Icehawk is a ice elf. He was a fighter. The Ice Elves, if you're wondering where I got Ice Elves, he was an old AD&D character. I pulled the Ice Elf stats out of the old Roll-Aids Elves book. Those Roll-Aids books, I missed them. They were some of the first really detailed third-party content that I got a hold of. And they would do these topics books like elves and dwarves and giants. They even teamed up with Grenadier once to do their Giants book corresponded to Grenadier's new range of giant miniatures. So each giant miniature was represented with a bunch of details on ecology and an adventure, and they were just really cool. But so anyway, Shagon was an ice elf. And why do I like him? Because Shagon, out of all the characters I had probably the most epic story arc I have played in a character. Now, this is in the early days, probably starting... Shagon Icehawk started, I think, in late grade school, and I played him through, I think, early high school. And so Shagon, over those years, went from a simple adventuring fighter, ice elf fighter. Actually, I believe he actually started as just a regular elf fighter, and then when I got the Roll-Aids book, I decided he was an ice elf, and my DM was cool enough to let me just make the stat modifications. Shagon started out as a regular adventurer, just a normal fighter, and going through with the rest of the party. I remember I used to change his illustration every time something in his appearance changed. So in one adventure, when he lost a horn from his helmet, I erased it and drew a broken horn. As his armor was damaged, I would draw the damage. It was weird, but it made for this ever-changing character illustration that was fun. So anyways, flash forward through Shagon's career. I believe, we're into junior high. Shagon has now adventured through, I think he's 10th, 11th level, something like that. Can't remember. He's in the mid-level range. And one story, he ends up getting... doing something. I can't remember what it was exactly. So long ago. But he ends up becoming the king of the Ice Elves. Which is cool. I mean, that's back in AD&D. You're getting in those high levels. There's upper levels, the mid to upper levels. You're wanting to look at the stronghold. My DM had some sort of story arc where I had to fight back. We had to fight back the horde of blue bugbears in the frozen north of Greyhawk. And, saving the Ice Elf Kingdom, which was right on the edge of the Black Ice, or whatever it was. It's been a while. Anyway, so Shagon becomes a king of his people. It's really cool. He becomes a king of his people. And he was junior high. Maybe the power went to my head. Shagon turned into a real dick. That character just became a despot. I think, his alignment officially shifted to an evil alignment. I think it was I don't think it was chaotic evil. I want to say he went either neutral evil or lawful evil. But Yeah, I became a real became a real despot. He had saved the Ice Elf people, and now he was going to militarize them. So, in militarizing the High Elves or the Ice Elves, you know, he was still adventuring at that point. I did create a son for the character at one point for because we wanted to do some low level adventures. So I had Shagon's son going out doing adventures. Shagon had a wife in the game. And so somewhere down the road, Shagon ends up getting captured by the Drow. I don't know. So keep in mind, this is back in junior high, and so probably not playing the most realistic of campaigns and realistic of storylines. And there's a lot of stuff that's getting omitted here just because I don't want to look like an idiot. 11, 12-year-old, 10-year-old, whatever, Eli and his friends were very much boys of the 70s and 80s. And so there's a lot of dumb crap that went on, in the course of these adventures. So Shagon gets captured by the Drow. And because he's evil, he's not exactly out of place. By now, he's already evil. And at this point, the most fundamental shift in Shagon occurs. He becomes chaotic evil because he really looks around at the Drow society as much of it as we knew back in the in the 80s, and he looks at it and he sees what's going on, and he decides that this is the model that he wants to model for the Ice Elves. Now this tickles the Drow to no end, that a surface elf wants his people to be like the Drow. This is a really big chance for the Drow to feel like they've really stuck it to the elves that have always hated and reviled them and forced them underground. And so Shagon actually decides that he's going to abandon the Ice Elf gods and start worshiping Lolth. And so we end up with this thing that occurs in the Ice Elf community, the Cult of the Ice Spider. And the Cult of the Ice Spider was this thing where, he was mirroring or masquerading the Lolth as this iconic totemic ice spider. Ice elves in our games were a little bit more savage and barbarian-like, so having an animal totem was certainly a way to go. So Shagon is basically selling his people out to the Drow by having them worship this ice spider, which is really just a manifestation of Lolth. Flash forward, get into it. We end up our regular gaming group ended up fusing with another local group. It was the closest I've ever been to actually, in my early years at least, to being part of a gaming club. It was several groups that were all kind of sharing a collective narrative. And so they had also this big Greyhawk spanning campaign. Well, because of course back then that was the only campaign setting that was really there, was Greyhawk. So we had this big Greyhawk spanning campaign, and at a certain point, believe one of the characters in one of the other groups was the rightful. It had come out in game. He was the rightful ruler of Onwall, if I recall correctly. And so the big mega plot that developed over the course. At this point, we're doing some Kingmaker shit. We're not even really adventuring anymore. We're just doing empire building and plotting and planning. And we've got our lower level characters on the side. So we're almost playing like this tactical game or the strategic game of Greyhawk with our high level characters, while our low level characters, Shagon's son and other characters that have been created are still doing their local gaming group stuff. But this collective club has now got together. So we had this brilliant strategy where we're going to go ahead and get Onwall into this big pincer move. And I was supposed to. So one of the guys was actually a ruler of he had risen to power amongst the barbarians in the north, and so Shagon was going to hook up with his guys, and we were going to come down from the north while they came up from the south. And we were going to catch Onwall in this pincer move, and so Shagon's plan, his thing was to come down from the north, by a land route and block Onwall from getting support from its neighbors on the ground. The barbarians were supposed to come in by the sea and lock up Onwall's navy, and then the other players were going to come up with their army from the south. And you'll have to forgive me, I don't remember exactly the geography here, but so part of the plan was Shagon, with his Drow elf allies, was going to go ahead and run a 24-hour siege of the capital city in Onwall. Basically, 24-hour siege of almost any of the castles and strongholds that we took on. By day, the Ice Elves would fight, and at night they would retreat to their camps and rest, and the Drow would come up and hit the strongholds by night. And so this was going on really well, and somehow things went really sour. I want to say that there was betrayal. Like one of the players betrayal by one of the players. In fact, I believe, I think it was the player who is the rightful ruler of Onwall. Made some sort of deal, and the navy, that the naval blockade by the barbarians did not happen, and so or it was busted, and so these sea barbarians, these guys had been crushed, and the troops coming up from the south never materialized, leaving Shagon, my armies, to their own. Onwall got support from the sea, and I wasn't able to hold it because I didn't have allies supporting me from the south. And the Drow then abandoned me because, abandoned Shagon. See, that's what I love about characters you really love, because you start thinking about it as me. So anyways, the Drow abandoned Shagon, and so to add insult to injury, not only is Shagon Icehawk abandoned by his allies, he is then forced westward into a desert. He's an ice elf, and so his ice elf warriors are forced into the desert, where they basically just start dying. Heat exhaustion, the lack of water, food. He loses his entire kingdom. He pretty much loses his entire people, because all his fighting, man, he's committed all of the soldiers to marching south. He's already led them to the worship of Lolth. So any of them that are left home are probably just going to carry that on. He's got no way to go home. He ends up a prisoner himself again, and I think that was the end of his career. I think he died a prisoner. So I had a PC who made it to high level world shaking stuff, who ended up dying in a dungeon. And when I say a dungeon, I mean like an actual prison cell dungeon. So yeah, I mean, Shagon Icehawk, probably my favorite character just because of the epic scope. You had some other cool ones I loved to play. I loved playing Maya the Thief. She was my female thief in 2nd edition, just because her life was pretty cool as far as just kind of coming up from a lowly street thief and actually rising the ranks of the Thieves Guild. Outlaw of Ulick, my first cavalier, was cool because he was a cavalier, but he was an outlaw, and he was basically all the advantages besides all the non-combat statistical advantages that come with a cavalier were completely out the door because he was dishonored. He was fun to play, but yeah, Shagon's got to be the one, just simply because everything that he went through, and the fact that I played him from some of my earliest AD&D games and all the way up into high school, and the span of his life, the things that he did, his change from a good aligned fighter, adventuring to kind of this weird, descent into darkness to save his people. I mean, the reason he went and became this totalitarian kind of nasty guy trying to, who was just like iron-fisted over his people. I guess you could kind of call it a, sort of like a Dracula thing, Vlad Dracul. He's like, the Prince of Wallachia, and he was this total bastard, but it was all for his people. I just dug that transition, as over the character's life, and it was just really cool to do something. I have never played a character that long and go through that and have had him go through that much change. I've not DM'd a character that's really gone through that kind of a span of character development. I'd love to see it happen in a campaign, and hopefully, this 5th edition game I'm running right now will end up running that way. Got some really cool characters in it, so we'll see where that goes. But anyways, we've reached the end of my tale, the tale of Shagon Icehawk, the Ice Elf fighter who died in a dungeon later on in life after a failed attempt at conquest. This is Eli with Elfbait. Like, share, and subscribe. Tell me about your favorite character down below. Hopefully you had a better name than Shagon Icehawk, but you know what? Those are the names you make when you're 10. But yeah, like, share, subscribe. Get the word out. By all means, love hearing from folks. This is not being done just for me so I can talk in front of a camera, because actually I'm incredibly shy and introverted, and so I'm, not asking for your pity, but yeah, I'm definitely not doing this because I like seeing myself on a screen and so I can brag and say, ooh, I have a YouTube channel. No. So, have a good one. Get out and game.